Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another Daily Maverick special webinar. Sorry if we've kept you waiting for a minute as we tried to fix the system, but we're all here. Thank you to the South African Human Rights Commission for sponsoring this afternoon's webinar, and thank you to you, the viewers and the listeners and the readers who have already sent, I think I counted 15 or 16 questions that we're going to have to pose and debate in the course of the next hour's discussion. If you've been following these webinars that we've been holding at the Daily Maverick, you will have seen that a lot of the webinars, certainly the ones that I have curated, have focused on the medical and health questions that are related to the COVID-19 pandemic. But today we're going to take a different tack, and we're going to be looking at the human rights issues that COVID-19 presents, but to link those human rights questions to the 25th anniversary of the South African Human Rights Commission and to the past and future work of the South African Human Rights Commission. And for that purpose, I think we are very fortunate that we have two people who know the work of the Commission and its purposes in life and the Constitution backwards to join us and to help with this discussion. The first person I'd like to introduce is Professor Bongani Majola. Bongani is the current chairperson of the Human Rights Commission, and he's been in that position, I think, since 2017. But he also has a very distinguished history as a human rights advocate and a lawyer in this country. He was, for a number of years, the director of the Legal Resources Center, but he was also, for a number of years, a deputy prosecutor in the International Criminal Tribunal of Rwanda. So Advocate Majola is somebody who is steeped in human rights and law. Thank you for joining us, Bongani.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And our second guest is no less distinguished. Her name is Advocate Faranaaz Veriava. Faranaaz is currently the head of work on the right to basic education at Section 27, which is a NGO that focuses on constitutional rights, particularly to health and to basic education. We can thank Faranaaz and her team for the recent very, very important judgment in relation to children's rights to the to school meals and the National School Nutrition Program. But Faranaaz, like Bongani, has more than 20 years of experience in law and human rights. She's written a book on the right to basic education, well worth reading, and continues as an activist around core constitutional rights. So thank you both for joining us. And I'd like to start with Bongani Majola. We've agreed in advance that I can call him Bongani. So starting with Bongani. And Bongani, can you just start this conversation by telling us a little bit about the role, the importance of the Human Rights Commission and what you think it has accomplished in the last 25 years of its existence?
Thank you, Mark. I hope I can call you Mark. In order to understand the importance of the South African Human Rights Commission, of course, one has to understand why it was established. You note in the Constitution that in Section 7.2, the drafters of the Constitution gave the duty to the state to fulfill, to promote, to protect the rights that are in the Bill of Rights. But of course, they know that power tends to run away to corrupt and what have you. So they needed, therefore, a mechanism that was going to ensure that the state stays the cause, monitor it. And so they created the Chapter 9 institution. Now, the South African Human Rights Commission is one of those, and it has then the biggest human rights mandate in the country to promote human rights, to protect human rights, and to monitor and assess the observance of human rights in the country. In a way, the South African Human Rights Commission is some form of a vanguard for the promotion and protection of human rights in the country. And it serves then as a form of a bridge between what the state does and how it impacts on the community. So between the rights bearers and the duty bearers, we work in that space. And with regard to what the Commission has done, I mean, in order to talk about what the Commission has done, one has to understand that the mandate of the Commission is very, very wide. The Commission has got is given the powers to advise government, but at the same time to hold government to account. For example, in Section 184.3, we've got to call organs of states on a yearly basis to ask them what they've done in order to fulfill what we call socio-economic rights in the Constitution. But we investigate the things. We mediate also when there are complaints that we think that can be settled by mediation. The Commission even litigates sometimes where it becomes necessary to do so. So in the course of covering this very wide mandate, we have, for example, investigated the treatment of inmates in the correctional services institutions, and that has resulted in the establishment of the Judicial Inspectorate for Correctional Services, which is a step in the right direction. Right now, we are talking about the possibility of that component also taking part as an independent institution in the National Preventative Mechanism, which we also are responsible for and are running. We did investigations and make recommendations on the way in which the media reports on issues, especially racial issues involving blacks and whites. We've done poverty hearings. Some of these things, of course, have yielded results. Others have yielded less than good results. We have done in terms of litigation, as I said, that we've got the litigation mandate. We've litigated in the Bear case, where the issue of customary succession for women was at stake, and the court came very clearly in favor of everybody, of equality, and everybody being able to inherit. We have done mediation, investigated fighting racism, for example, the Reeds 4 case, where you remember the white students gave black workers some food, which was on which they had sprinkled urine. We've dealt with cases of LGBTI. We had the Nare case up in Seshego. We have collaborated also with international bodies. We played a very big role in establishing the network of African NHRIs and also the Global Alliance. I mean, I can go on and on and on, but those are some of the things.
Sorry, thank you for for pointing that out to me. I was just saying you've clearly established quite a track record for the Commission over 25 years in the protection and the fulfillment of human rights. But before I go on and ask Faranaaz a couple of questions, I just want to ask you, where is the Commission? Is the Commission a Johannesburg thing? Because often human rights violations take place in rural areas, in informal settlements, away from urban areas. Can you just tell us a little bit about the structure of the Commission and how somebody would reach you if they needed help?
Well, the Commission is in each of the 9 provinces. That's where the Commission is. And if a person needs the assistance of a province, they need just to go to the office of the Commission in that province. Unfortunately, we don't have many offices in each province, but Johannesburg has a provincial office and a head office.
Thank you very much. Now, Faranaaz, I know you worked for the Human Rights Commission for a little while, for a few years, I believe. But you've spent most of your life as a lawyer outside in civil society, in NGOs like Section 27, like the Center for Applied Legal Studies. Can you give us your frank views about the importance or the lack of importance of the Commission, and how has civil society worked with the Human Rights Commission?
Thanks very much, Mark, and thank you very much for having me here today. I just want to say to the listeners that both of you are men I have very particular working relationships with. Mark has been my boss, although it's disputable who's in charge of who when we talk on a daily basis, but we are forever comrades. And then Professor Majola and we've been through that very difficult rites of passage called pupillage together, where we were study partners. So yes, we are bonded for life. I am bonded for life to both Mark and Bongani in very particular ways. And as Mark said, I've worked at the Commission. I headed one of their provincial offices, the only provincial office at the time, which was Cape Town because of proximity to Parliament. When I was at the bar, I was briefed by the Commission. And then over the last 2 sets of commissions, I've sat on various advisory committees. So Bongani has taken you through a lot of the Chapter 9 powers, Chapter 9 in terms of the Constitution, which then is given more meat in its Enabling Act. The Enabling Act was recently changed. It was changed in 2013. So it isn't the act that I operated with, but I want to speak to some of the principles in the act and in the Constitution and my sense of it within the context of the question that Mark is asking. The first thing I want to say is also to tell another story, which is when I started at the Commission, there was some real giants at the Commission. There was the intellectual giant, Dr. Bani Pachana, who I had heard about all my life, coming from a Black consciousness family. There was Helen Suzman, who I had heard about critically, coming from a Black consciousness family. And there were people like the formidable advocate Penzi Tlakula, who as a Black lawyer, female lawyer, was such a figure for me. And I just have to tell this one particular story before. So on my first day going to a meeting at the Commission, Helen Suzman comes up to me and says, "Hello, dearie, come and tell me about yourself." And she walks me to the toilet. And she carries on talking to me while she leaves the toilet door open. And here am I, a 27-year-old, thinking, oh my God, I'm watching Helen Suzman wee. So that is the context in which I came into the Commission. The first thing I want to say to the Commission, Bongani touched on it, and that is the Section 184.3 mandate in the Constitution. The Commission, we live in the context of extreme inequality. We therefore have a Constitution that has a justiciable set of socioeconomic rights. And to ensure that those rights are enforced, the Commission was given the power to receive reports annually from the different departments tasked with enforcing socioeconomic rights. And one of the big criticisms over the years from within civil society has been about that particular power. Some of it has been because of logistics and financial resources. I understand that, but some of it has also, I think, we need to find more creative ways of doing this. So one of the things that hasn't happened is the regularity of reports. The Constitution speaks about annual reports. The reports have come out every 4 to 5 years. Then people have felt there hasn't been sufficient analysis of the reports and its fulfillment and government's fulfillment of its obligations in the context of how our courts and also how international treaty bodies see the enforcement and realization of those socioeconomic rights. And this started very early on. One of the big criticisms was that civil society wasn't given enough time to engage. The Commission hasn't been transparent enough with those reports. Civil society can make its own, create its own shadow reporting process on those reports, and then also use the information from those reports when we as civil society report to treaty bodies. The other principle I want to focus on very quickly is the independence and impartiality that is spoken about in the South African Human Rights Commission Act, Section 4. And one of the importance of these Chapter 9 bodies is within their different mandates to speak truth to power. We saw Advocate Thuli Madonsela do it at the height of corruption and turned around how people perceived or even knew about the public protector. And there have been ebbs and flows, in my opinion, in how the Commission has done this through the 25 years. At the beginning, I often think of people may forget this, but the Commission did an inquiry into racism in the media. And especially at this time of Black Lives Matter, the media were very critical of that report. So the Commission didn't just criticize government, it also looked into the media, which is important, and looked at things that were very ahead of its time, like unconscious bias, for example. They also did a report at the time, and I did a lot of the field work as a youngster then, on racism in schools. And again, if you think of Black Lives Matter now and what kids who attend Model C schools and private schools are saying, a lot of what was said in those early years, in the 1998, a lot of that is still being echoed now. But that comes from the ability of the Commission to speak independently. And then, the last point, I don't want to take up too much time, but the Commission has different powers, as I've said. And one of the powers that I think has been very useful and that the Commission should make more of is in Section 14 of the Act, which is mediation, conciliation, and negotiation. And I often think of when I was at the Center for Applied Legal Studies, and we brought the education rapporteur down to talk about school fees. And there was this, at the time, we were going to litigate on the unconstitutionality of school fees. Before schools were made, the poorest schools were made fee-free. What the Commission did, they were the round table that facilitated the discussion between civil society and between government. And particularly now around school closures and how difficult and fraught that discussion is. I think having the unions there, civil society there, and having government there, it could be a good way to get over some of the kind of impasses that are happening there. Finally, I want to say that the Commission, last one, Mark.
Okay.
The Commission has always had the power to investigate, do public hearings, and to make reports. This is about, in some ways, the individual complaint mechanism circumvents the lack of access to justice, because through that process, there have been things like the corporal punishment investigation, the investigation into initiations that the Commission has done, and which led to the prohibition regulations prohibiting initiations. There have also been things like, we're looking at the collapse of the Eastern Cape health system now within the context of COVID, and we can talk about there. But that was very useful in holding public officials to account. And I'll stop there.
Thanks, Faranaaz. I mean, a lot of what you've said is about, I think, the powers that the Commission has and the extent to which it uses those powers effectively. Bongani has said that, and you both said that the Commission has extensive constitutional powers. But I'm looking at, some of the questions that are coming up, and people are saying, but how is it then, after 25 years, inequality is deeper than it's ever been, that COVID-19 has exposed the fact that people's rights have not been respected in relation to housing, in relation to health, in relation to education, in relation to water, etc., etc. Bongani, do you think government treats the Commission seriously? Is it afraid of your bite? And could you be doing more to use those powers that you have in terms of the law?
Mark, thank you very much. On that question, on this very last question that you've asked, I think that the government is not afraid of the Commission at all, for many reasons. For example, come again?
Should it be afraid of the Commission?
It should, because the Constitution says that the government must fulfill those rights, and the Constitution must, the Commission must observe and assess whether those rights are being fulfilled. And they have sworn to uphold the Constitution, so they should be afraid of the what you call of the Commission, because the Commission has then the power to say that they are not complying with their constitutional oath. But you see, the problem is that some of these powers appear on paper to be real powers. We have sent now to the Ministry of Justice, I think in June 2019, 2 years after we got into office, we have sent the act that Faranaaz was referring to, saying that it's been amended. Because that act, it gives with one hand and takes with the other hand. I mean, we have the power to subpoena, but we cannot exercise that power to subpoena without going to the local DPP to ask for permission to do that. You see, so then the way in which the budget is given to the Commission, you find that every year you are faced with the indication that the budget is being reduced, and so on. So there is bound, therefore, to be inequalities if there is no effective way in which the Commission can say to government, listen, this should not happen because it impacts negatively on people's rights. Sometimes, and we have raised this with the Portfolio Committee, that most of the time you try to meet a government minister, and they just ignore you. We've raised this with the Portfolio Committee and with some of the ministers to say there's gatekeeping, there's all kinds of things. You find that you want to speak to the Minister of Health and you write a letter in June 2019, and up to now you don't even get an acknowledgement in spite of many what you call, and the health sector is in bad shape. We visit provincial offices and we say to the MECs, listen, this health system is bad, is in a bad shape, do something about it, and you get ignored. But what else? And also the powers that we have can only be used in an investigation. If there is no investigation, then there is no powers to hold government. So the act needs to be changed.
You sound very frustrated, Bongani, as the chairperson of the Human Rights Commission. What is your budget? What is the budget? And is there not a problem there, given the fact that you are meant to have oversight over Parliament, over the executive, etc., to make sure that they abide by the Constitution, but they are the hand that feeds you? And whilst I'm asking that, before I come to Faranaaz, let me just say one other thing, because a viewer raised it. Are you independent? Are you? Some people suspect that you're in the pocket of the government anyway, of the ANC. Can we trust you?
Well, I mean, it is good to have people feeling that we are not independent, because it keeps us on our toes, and we've got to. But we are independent. One of the things that we've got to look at are the statements that we issue on an ongoing basis. We're not afraid to criticize government. We're not afraid to meet government to say, listen, this is not right. We do what we think the Commission should do. But as for the budget, yes, the budget is very limited. It's about 200 million thereabout, and yeah, most of it gets taken by remuneration, and very little remains. What we need in the Commission also is critical skills to do analysis. Faranaaz was talking about the reports that come in, and so you need to establish those specialist committees that do that. But also, as a Commission, I think that we have struggled in establishing much more concrete relationships with civil society, so that we can work hand in glove with them. It's something that we have now started under COVID. We now have a relationship with many civil society organizations to do monitoring, but we hope to grow that, so that we can have a greater impact.
Well, while you're talking about civil society, that gives me an opportunity to switch back to Faranaaz. But just to give you something to think about, Bongani, while I ask a question to Faranaaz, Lindiwe Mabena asked, why don't they take government to court when their recommendations are being ignored, especially on issues like the healthcare system? I'm not going to ask you to answer that now, but maybe we'll come back. Why don't you behave like Thuli Madonsela and be a complete nuisance and refuse to let go and be quiet when we face these violations? But Faranaaz, another question, and it relates to civil society. How can civil society help the Commission? I would imagine that the Human Rights Commission has a lot more power than Section 27, at least on paper. What can you do to support? And Bongani says we're building relationships with civil society. Are you happy with those relationships? I mean, Joe Jafta sent in a question saying civil society has been considerably weakened during the lockdown. The majority of grassroots-based organizations are the eyes and ears of what happens in the community, which is true. How can their relationship be strengthened, i.e. between civil society and Human Rights Commission, during this time when funding in particular is almost non-existent? And I might add, because somebody else asked this, when it's difficult for civil society to operate because of lockdown restrictions, social distancing, etc. So can you talk about this civil society, Human Rights Commission nexus for a few minutes?
Yeah, sure. I hope I can. Can I just say that I understand a lot of the logistical and financial issues that the Commission does have. Many years ago, also when I was working at the Commission, there was something that came out called the Paris Principles, which was a set of governing principles looking at how do you ensure the independence and impartiality of the Commission. One of the most stunting elements of that is the funding of the Commission. Like everything else, you underfund something and you make it less effective. But having said that, I want to say that over the years as well.
Faranaaz, why don't you as civil society go to court around the funding of the Commission? If you have something that's so central to the Constitution, but it can't perform its job because it isn't given enough money, what do we do other than complain?
what we can do is look at how we build our relationships with the Commission and how we continue to work with the Commission. And there have been points at which, again, there have been ebbs and flows here, where civil society and the Commission have worked extremely well together. And again, I come back to the example of Section 27's role in the health hearings in the Eastern Cape. And here there was quite a close relationship with the Commission, where we were able to use the Commission together with the grassroots.
Faranaaz, we're struggling.
Where we could highlight the systemic issues around the healthcare system. One way of doing it.
Thank you. To both of you, I mean, people are clearly very concerned about this civil society relationship and how civil society can strengthen and protect. Siwe Koka says, how can we strengthen and capacitate grassroots participation in order to protect the office of the Human Rights Commission? But somebody else says, one of the problems the Human Rights Commission is to be in an ivory tower. So how do you bring the Human Rights Commission down to earth? And I guess those questions have never been more important than now in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, where what we're seeing across the board is violations of human rights. Bongani, many people in civil society have complained, for example, that the supplementary budget takes away more money from health and education and food and sanitation than it gives. Seems to me that COVID-19 presents the Human Rights Commission with the ultimate challenge for its relevance and its power in society. So will you talk now a little bit about what you're doing around COVID-19 and how you intend to make yourself felt? And then I'll come back to Faranaaz to hear her views about what are the critical issues at this moment. But COVID-19 and the Human Rights Commission, Bongani.
Thank you, Mark. With regard to the issue of how the civil society and the Commission can work, it's something that we speak about, especially now under COVID-19, because we realize that the Commission has got limited resources and we have got a vast area that we have to cover, and that the best way we can do this is through a partnership with civil society organizations. We have also started, in the health sector, for example, to liaise with civil society organizations that work in that space, and we're trying to build something out of it in order to be able to work with it. In education also they have partnered with unions. We also have partnered with unions but it's something that we are building up with regard to civil society. The Commission may appear to be in the ivory tower. That's the appearance, but clearly we are very open to joining forces with people. Yesterday I had a meeting with the Health Professions Council, all towards cultivating the what you call that relationship. Now coming to COVID-19, what are we doing? We have established a committee that is looking at all these issues that are thrown up by COVID-19, and we discussing them. Most of the time we tend to sit down with ministries and we try to sit down with ministries and try to argue the what you call the issues with them. Unfortunately, some are available, others are much more difficult to get, but it is things that we are looking at,
Yeah. And are you talking to communities about it? And let me ask you a specific question. I mean, all this complaint about the last budget, do you think that budget passes a human rights test? Do you think it's a constitutional budget?
No, we don't think that it is a constitutional budget. I think that the debate really is what is ideal, because the money is taken and put in a situation in a program that is intended to save lives and so on. So it needs a little bit more debate and analysis on our part. We haven't got to a situation where we say, no, now we are going to litigate and so on. We need to be careful, and we've been looking at the decisions of the court when the actions and regulations under the COVID-19 are challenged as to what comes out of that. And so the process has, I must admit, not been as quick as it would be in a normal situation.
Yeah, I mean, the situation is far from normal now. It's very abnormal. The living conditions of people are getting more and more desperate, as
Yes.
Faranaaz and people showed with the National School Nutrition Program. Faranaaz, how can you just won a judgment, a very important judgment, saying that the right to nutrition and right to food is part of the right to basic education. But again, a judgment is a piece of paper. It's the implementation that is the critical question. Will you reflect on that implementation of this judgment and do so, again, thinking about the role that the Human Rights Commission can play as an ally as you take the next step forward? And another thing that concerns me is there's a danger that schools might be closed for several months again now. What is that going to mean when it comes to children's right of access to food if schools get closed? So Faranaaz, if you can kick off on that, and then Bongani, maybe you could also just say a little bit about this food and education issue. But Faranaaz, over to you to begin with.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that the Commission can actually do to assist us, as they did in the textbook judgment, Mark. You might remember that. But to just say two things in a very well-intentioned way. The one is, I've observed over the years that the Commission has become this mammoth bureaucracy, and budget concerns are there, yes, but so civil society also have budget concerns, but we need to look at what the main social justice issues are that are affecting our times and find unique ways within our particular strengths to address that. So, and within civil society, we don't have an organization like Equal Education or Equalizers behind us, but we often work with the media in framing a narrative around the issues that we want. So we have to look at what the Commission's strengths are. The other thing I just want to say is the Commission does have the committees that are made up of people from civil society. Maybe not grassroots civil society, but civil society nevertheless. And the Commission has that ability to hear what some of the issues are. With regards to the Education Committee, there are some very strong people on that committee. People like Mary Metcalf, who was one of our first MECs of Education, Professor Anne Skelton, who sits on the committee for the Convention for the Rights of the Child, Salim Valley, who is a long-time education activist and general activist. And when we had this meeting about what do we do around school closures, there was a lot of discussion about the strength of the committee, or the strength of the Commission, to bring people around the table. I don't know, that means government, civil society, and the unions. And let's thrash out this issue of back to school. What are the pros and cons? We know that learners won't get food. We know that they are unlikely to be infected or be vectors. Although there is a risk, the risk is minimal. We know that only 70% of learners are not learning while they're at home. On the other hand, how do we make sure that the school community is safe? These are things that we could thresh out. So that's the one thing. I think the commission.
Are you putting this as a specific proposal to Bongani, Majola, and the commission that they should play some sort of facilitating and mediating role over
Yes.
the right to basic education in the context of COVID-19? Bongani, what do you say to that? I think the commission has taken a position that schools should be reopened. There's clearly a lot of anxiety, there's conflict, there's people talking past each other. Is this a classic case where the commission could step in and actually play a very, very important role?
It is a classic case in which the commission can step in and play a very active role, but that doesn't mean that the commission has been doing nothing about it. We have been engaging. You know, I think there are many ways to peel an orange. Now, what we've been doing is we've been speaking to unions, we've been speaking to the ministry, because I think those are the two main centers, you know, of this contestation. But we have been dealing with both of them. For example, we have said to unions that we do not believe that schools should be closed. You know, we've been upfront with that and so on. And where we felt that the schools should not open, we engaged with the minister on the 31st of June, for example. And we said, we don't think you should open the schools now because the schools are not ready. The safety, the health and safety protocols are not in place, and so on and so on. So getting them into one room is yet another option that the commission can have a look at it. But we've been this whole week, last week, and this week, yes, we've been on the media saying that we do not believe that the schools should be closed. I was interviewed yesterday morning, for example, about this very same issue, and I said, for many reasons, that we worried about the push to have the schools closed. We don't believe that the schools must be closed, because in fact we believe that the regime that is operative now at schools is much better than the regime that operates at homes, and therefore the possibilities of infection should be much reduced. But besides that, you know, when children miss the whole year of contact learning, I think it causes a lot of damage to them. And we've heard that when children do not read and don't do maths for a very long time, it has a negative effect on that. We have told this to the department, we've told this to the unions, and we have taken a clear view as to which way we go. What we haven't done is into the same room, but that is also not excluded by what we are doing.
Thank you very much. That's very important. So you're seeing this question of schools as a fundamental rights question in which the Human Rights Commission and civil society has an important role to play. I would just say one thing, Bongani, is, and again I'm picking this up from viewers, is often if you're an ordinary member of society, you hear about these meetings. They take place, we used to say, when people smoked in smoke-filled rooms and nobody hears about them. But I think communication at this moment to the public is critical to reassure people and to frame the issues that we're talking about and that you've referred to. Now, the schools is a really important question, but I want to move us on because I'm looking at the time that is left to us. Sorry, my phone just went off. There was a question from Beverly, which is about another group of people who've experienced extreme human rights violations during the period of COVID-19. Beverly asks, what can we do when we are told that a foreign national isn't going to get shelter because they don't have the paperwork, when communities are meant to keep clean but there's no water? And then she says, at grassroots level, the commission seems exceptionally distant. I think we've dealt with that latter part. But there are big issues around rights of migrants, discrimination in access to grants, in access to shelter, in access to food parcels. Faranaaz, will you just say first of all, what you and civil society think on that issue?
Sorry, Mark, I was just reading the comments and I lost you. Just say it one more time.
Just, do you think this question of unfair discrimination against migrants, against refugees, being denied access to shelters, to food parcels, etc., is it a problem? And are we doing enough about it? Are you doing enough as Section 27? Is the Human Rights Commission doing enough about this issue? We're talking about hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of lives.
Let me speak about it within the context of the school nutrition case. Firstly, look, I think, as we know, that the effect of COVID is that the most, and we've seen this globally, the most marginalized and vulnerable are the ones that are most discriminated against and the ones most affected by COVID. So we know very much that, and it doesn't make sense. There is no rationale to this, because if there's one thing we've learned from COVID is that we are all dependent on each other, that we need solidarity within humanity, because if one of us is not cared for, the other one, that person is at risk, and then that person also poses a risk to those that are less at risk or whatever. So, you know, I think it's a moment for global solidarity. I think it's a moment where we have to respect every human being within this country. And what we saw within the context of the poverty, what we're calling the poverty pandemic now. It was said in the Oxfam Human Rights, an Oxfam report last week, that hunger, South Africa is one of the emerging hotspots of hunger. And what we saw when we were building the school nutrition case is that while, look, access to food parcels was far from sufficient, and we know less people got access to food parcels during the lockdown than before the lockdown. But what we also saw was that learners that were undocumented didn't get any access to food parcels, whereas they would have benefited from the food nutrition scheme. And again, I do think, and I keep on coming back to this, but I do think that is a way in which the Commission can engage, can use its powers. And its powers of public hearings are one of its most powerful tools. And I know we're in lockdown or partial lockdown or stage 3 lockdown, but we are using these virtual tools all the time. And to bring people into a virtual room representing different civil society organizations, if you have something around the exclusion of non-citizens from basic from basic services right now, like access to health, if people aren't treated, they also become vectors. If they don't have access to proper quarantine facilities, they are at risk, but they also put broader society at risk. If they are hungry, so we can find ways. The Commission can put together a report, make that report public with its recommendations. Mark, you asked earlier about how the Commission can assist us around the hunger issue and the nutrition report. You were our executive director at the time, and you know, after we ran the textbook case, the Commission ran a national textbook hearing where it brought together people across the board, school governing bodies, government officials, learners, everybody. And they developed a report on the delivery of textbooks, not only in Limpopo, like our case was limited to, but nationally, and made national recommendations around that. And it really added to the kind of momentum around the non-delivery of textbooks. So that's what I'm saying. We as civil society can pick up issues, but the Commission can also create a momentum around those issues.
So the Commission has to carry them home, and the Commission has to make sure that the change happens. I mean, one of my criticisms of the Commission, Bongani, and I love you all very much, has been that there are many, many reports and hearings which are left on the shelf, where recommendations are not carried through. But we don't have time to comment on that. I want to stay on this issue of refugees and migrants and put a slightly different slant on it based on a question that we got. I got one of the questions that came in before we even started this webinar. Why is the Commission not protecting the rights of South African citizens in relation to illegal immigration, particularly in access to services and compromised services, particularly health and education, and the burden taxpayers have to carry in taking care of SADC and illegal immigrants? Now, I think I know what your answer will be, which is that everyone has rights in South Africa, and that's right. But does the Commission do enough on education? Somebody asked about human rights education programs by the Commission, engagement, not just with official civil society, but with communities about these questions of migration. Will you just reflect for a few minutes on that, Bongani?
Yeah, the Commission does do community education and community engagement. We've got officials who go out on a weekly basis. Well, now under COVID-19, in all provinces, we've got human rights officers, we've got advocacy officers. Their job is not to sit in the office, but to go out and engage communities and educate them and answer their questions and what have you. What perhaps we have not done under COVID is to bring people together, as Faranaaz was saying, and it's a very good suggestion that she's making, except that I think there is a break in the pipe. The information that she has does not reach the Commission. The water gets spilled somewhere, and by the time the pipe reaches the Commission is empty. I mean, it's the kind of information that we're looking for that enables us, because we even have litigation power. We've got the power to ask for information from government. We've got powers to investigate and to subpoena people and have a public hearing under subpoena and ask these questions and so on. What I think we need to do is that civil society and us need to sit down and work out how exactly we need to effectively work together. We need information that we can use to promote right, to push rights, to litigate, to do that. Civil society has got a lot of this information because we are so limited. We cannot go around and so on. So that's the problem. With regard to the migrants, yes, we have actually taken a number of issues of discrimination against migrants up with the National Command Council and with the Minister of Social Development and so on. And we've seen a lot of changes coming out after that. We have forever been raising with government all issues that relate to migrants, that relate to the violation of the rights of migrants, as far as we were able to do that, and we continue to do that. But we can do more, certainly. We can do more, certainly. So my sense is that my takeaway out of this meeting is that we need to do a lot more to engage closer with civil society, so that we can tell them what we can do, and we can learn how they can also support us and how we can support them. That two-way street kind of a relationship, I think, would work very, very well for human rights in the country and for the people of this country.
Thank you, Bongani. I think that's a very welcome offer and request and outcome from this webinar. I must say there's a lot of support for you and the Commission. Beverly Gumede says, I've attended some meetings with the Commission. I'm thankful for the opportunity. I propose that the Commission have more meetings with grassroots organizations. It would benefit us all if meetings are not as structured as I've seen them. I think that's important. Allow us an opportunity to communicate what we are seeing, and then please provide us with the resources to litigate or report misconduct. Wayne made a point to the organizers of these webinars that there's not enough grassroots voices. And I think, Wayne, you're absolutely right, because it's the grassroots where human rights issues are most manifest. There's been many questions. Bongani, before we sum up, I'm not able to go through all the questions we've received, but I am going to send them to you and to your office. And I'll ask you to agree live on camera that all questions will be answered, and that you will engage with people, particularly as the Human Rights Commission has sponsored this this webinar, because they're important questions. We really could have done with a few more hours. But just in closing, I want to ask both of you, you know, we're at a critical state in COVID-19 epidemic. We are seeing violations of socio-economic rights on a scale unheard of as a result of the lockdown. We're also beginning to see a government that operates more and more outside of the constitution in its decision-making processes, and which threatens not just socio-economic rights, but civil and political rights as well. My question to both of you, and I'll take Faranaaz and then allow Bongani to finish, is if civil society doesn't shine at this moment, or the Human Rights Commission doesn't deliver at this moment, then it will be too late, literally, for many hundreds of thousands, probably millions of people. So Faranaaz, first of all to you, what, and try and keep it short because I'm looking at the time, what really are the greatest challenges, and how should we be responding at this decisive moment?
Mark, I agree. We have to do more. We have to do more than we've ever done in our lives. I think the big issues are access to healthcare. Every day we hear of people that don't get tests. If they get in quarantine facilities, they need oxygen. They're not getting oxygen. It is our doctors that are writing personal letters for these kinds of things. People are not getting ventilators. They're not getting ICU beds. They're not getting transported. Access to healthcare and all its different manifestations right now are extremely important. Yesterday, we had somebody die whose mother died in our office. The day before, we had that. I think of all of you that were AIDS activists and are now activists again during this pandemic. Doctors are whistleblowers. Doctors are volunteering for the vaccine. We as civil society need to be ensuring access. We as citizens.
Faranaaz, we've lost you. Okay, sorry, you broke up.
Of it since was a case has been appalling. We need to do. I was saying that the role of the state in the treatment of its citizens, as was found in the Khoza case, we need to be doing more to protect civil and political rights there, the freedom of movement. So I would say, yes, those are the big issues. Civil and political rights in that regard, hunger, access to health. Mark.
Chairperson Majola, you have 3 years left.
Mark, I agree with Faranaaz, but it throws back to the fact that, you know, we're trying to reach at the same destination, but we're doing things individually. I think it's important that the Commission and civil society work closer together. One of the other critical issues, Mark, that I think that is a big problem in the country, and we've decided to make it one of the targets for this year, is corruption. You see, a lot of money goes to corruption. That is why hospitals do not have the medication. They do not have the PPE. But that is why hospitals didn't have the staffing even long before COVID-19 came, because money was taken and posts were not filled. And staff then became too tired of working for two people and getting the salary of one. Some left, some simply decided that they are not going to do their work. So we need to come together and try and deal with corruption, which is taking away money that should be going towards the delivery of socio-economic rights.
Bongani, thank you very much for that. We will come together. We wait for you to tell us that you have come together. with civil society, and civil society tell us that they have come together and used your combined power to address the many issues that have been raised in this webinar. I'd like to thank you both, Faranaaz. I'd like to thank you, Bongani. I'd like to thank the Commission for making this possible. I'd like to ask the Commission to organize more webinars like this, because there's clearly a lot of thirst and interest and a lot of questions and issues that people want to raise with you going forward. So thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon, and I wish you strength and health during this difficult time, but also determination to protect the rights in our constitution, because millions of people's lives depend upon it. So thank you very much. And to my colleague Faranaaz, today you have to press the button to switch us off, but good afternoon and good luck to everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks to you, Mark, and thanks to you, Faranaaz, and thanks to our viewers who have raised very important questions. Thank you.